Mr. Jakub, maybe you have some comments. How to identify the transformation successful? Coming back to your issue, why we have it in general, this digital transformation.
I will ask you if I'm because technically the translation is organized in a way that I see the same kind of a volume. English and Ukraine is very hard to understand. So that even your last question was for me like only I heard is what can you comment, but I don't even know what. So if you can, and I don't know how to solve it because I'm clicking interpretation is in English, but the kind of sound is exactly the same level, so it's impossible to hear even. So if you can either say it in English or say it slowly so I can understand the
Це
question.
англійською ще раз, або скажіть це дуже повільно, щоб я почув, розчув.
Let me ask in English then. In your opinion, what is a successful transformation, and how can we estimate or evaluate that transformation was successful?
Wow, how many hours I have? No, I'm in more.
2-3 хвилини. 2-3
Yeah,
minutes.
you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm older now to remember kind of an enthusiastic approach and even it's a kind of a personal statement. The last time I was on that kind of event was a few years ago in Kiev with the colleague of mine, who President Adamovich from Gdańsk, who was then killed, as you all know, in Gdańsk. And that was the last moment when we see each other and we were talking, and in a sense trying to that was the moment of, if you say, Poland as a champion of transformation, if you like. We were kind of the arrogant, trying to explain that basically the other countries of that region, they basically have to wait another 1 or 2 generations, and they basically, in an asymptotic way, be in the same moment. Right now, obviously, I'm completely embarrassed with that, and I understand that the time is not working for us, and the gravity is not working for us. 2 days ago, I had a meeting with very courageous people from Belarus, men, women, with kids even, who were for a moment in Poland, and I have the greatest respect to the courage of people of Belarus, Ukraine, etc. And I think, okay, that was my kind of a historical lesson. Is nothing is given forever. I think Poland right now would have a big problem even to be a member of the European Union and fulfill the so-called Copenhagen criteria. And I think the biggest lesson for all of us is that you have to strive. You have to work constantly. Anything is given. We're stupid to think that basically every economist know that the economy goes in kind of a cycles. And to have an assumption that democracy is given forever, I mean, that was probably the biggest mistake we ever made. So I'm not here to have any kind of a nice, regardless of the fact that democracy without efforts, without structure, without values, without things, and that for that reason, NGOs are extremely important as institutions, because the transformation based on the kind of, I know it's a bit provocative, on the kind of a clicktivism of this kind of, without the structure, is basically not going to work. So let me conclude. My kind of understanding is that historically, I call it effortless democracies, which means that people think is democracy is just maybe voting, maybe asking your emotion what you want, and not admitting there are things bigger than us, than our own interest. That without that effort, democracies historically, completely democratically, commit suicides. And I think right now is really a very crucial moment right now for all of us in this region and really globally, to understand that democracy needs effort, not just voting. Democracy and this effort, I call it effort-based democracy, is everything. To having your own opinion, to be able to communicate with other, to be able to take a part of responsibility, not only demanding. So it's a kind of a second generation, if you like. And that's all. It's very hard because people are not that easy to go beyond kind of a demand-driven type of the approach, and that will be tough. Anyway, oof, thank you. You don't ask me that question again.
Дякую дуже колегам за
Thank you
проговорення.
very much, dear colleagues, for the discussion. How we need the digital transformation. How can we say that it is successful? And in principle, it's very difficult to discuss whether we need it or not, because it's a fact. And the panelists, yeah, if we wanted to be within the rules of the game that exist in the society, we as civic society, we should be present, we should be active, and we should be able to work with these instruments. Christina and Jakub, in the presentations, they draw our attention that transformation is successful only when we solve problems. And transformation is not only about digitalization of something, it's about the change of general system, change of a structure, culture, including culture. And now, in the second question, in the second part, in this, I would like to ask you to share your views on risks of digital transformation. And Mr. Jakub paid attention to that a little bit. So, what are the risks of digital transformation for the society, and what is the role of civil society in preventing those negative things? How can we predict risks, and how can we act? Maybe we'll start, Mr. Shandor. Shandor, Mr. Shandor, in your opinion, what's your opinion on this?
First of all, I would refer back to your previous question a bit before talking about the risk, because I think it's crucial to see that, you know, if you want to evaluate whether a transformation or, you know, the digital transformation has been successful, you have always one, you know, point of view where you are at the moment, and you evaluate from this point of view. It might seem at the moment that it was successful, and turn out in 10 years that, you know, you completely misunderstood everything, and the transformation at the end led to a much worse direction. I mean, you know, was, if you would ask this question, the transformation of transportation in the 20th century successful? Well, it was in some regard, because, you know, you could fly everywhere, there were trains bringing goods and so on. And then you see also that there's extreme damage to the environment and climate change, partly coming from this transformation, which doesn't say it shouldn't be happen, but, you know, it does. It's not that obvious that it was simply successful. And I think in technology you also have risks, and now coming to your current question, that you might not be able to see at the moment, or the effects you're not able to evaluate at the moment. But definitely you see how it transforms society. It makes, while connecting many people around the globe, which is definitely an advantage, can also isolate you, because it won't help you if you have, you know, no one to talk to in the next room or in your village, and you have no common narratives with those people who are very close to you, let's say. I think this isolation and this fragmentation of societies and local communities can be a risk. The biggest risk, I would say, is that you completely use your intimacy, in a sense that, you know, everything that's out on the web is in some way, or will become in some way, public, I guess. You have a trace everywhere. Your privacy is barely protected. Your data is out for everyone who is interested in having it. So you, as a person, as an individual, have much less protection. And this is, I think, also interesting, you know, for how civil society acts, especially in countries where civil society is in danger. These people can be constantly surveilled. They're under the observation of governments. So in this regard, it might have been easier to do a partisan group in the Second World War, where you could hide among the bushes, than currently derail a train, because everywhere you have the surveillance cameras, your mobile phone tells everyone where you are, which apps you use, with whom you communicated. And this will, you know, this is part of the transformation, and it's very interesting how you can react as a vulnerable individual, or as a part of a vulnerable group, to these challenges. And I will stop here, because there are many more risks. I find this as a quite interesting and important one, so let me just leave it at this point here.
Дякую дуже.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for bringing attention that coming back to what Mr. Jakub told, that we need to identify common criteria for us, and we need to use those criteria in order to assess success or not success of digital transformation. And a very good example with the transportation. And if the system integrity of the system is important for us, and then airlines, the trains, it can be partially, it can be a risk. It can be also, but there were some negative effects of this. I would like to continue with Mrs. Christina. What's your opinion about the risk and role of civil society in preventing those negative effects? I agree that an approach for NGOs as to risk management, it should be predictable. If an NGO takes is brave to introduce some digital transformation and to resolve some problems in the country or in the community. And it's not about an NGO, because other institutions could represent civil society. If to speak about risk in that field, I believe that for countries that are developing, the first risk is, will they use our product? Is our society ready for that? Is it educated enough? Is it economical? Can it use it? Can it use instruments in which we invested our time, our money, or money of our donors, or public money, or local money, and other resources? It's a very important issue, because very often, as it was mentioned, somebody does something because they can do that. But sustainability, people don't think about sustainability, and it's a risk. Will our product be sustainable in 3-5 years after it comes into operation? And the society, will it be ready to use it? So let's compare Ukraine and Estonia, for example. I will speak in the context of Ukraine, because I'm more competent on our issues. The majority of administrative services in Estonia are provided electronically, but it doesn't mean that such as services cannot be received on paper. So we should not forget about the different categories of our clients for such products, and we should remember that the service, in a sense of digital transformation, it should be accessible to all. It should be, and if we don't think about the risk of sustainability of using our digital solutions, then we will have a cultural gap, and there will be sabotage of our main users, I mean citizens. So it's one of the biggest risks. The most simple, the most primitive, and which we forget about when we start working on information, on digital transformation. Next risk: users. Will they be educated how to use information technologies that we offer? So that's why when we think about managing risk, we need to think, and we need to run education campaigns, information campaigns for end users to have a clear idea how to use such instruments. And in general, I believe that it's very important to organize, especially organizations that are responsible for digital transformations in their countries or in their regions. It's important that they think about political risks also, because to communicate correctly the necessity of solutions for problems and the necessity of reforms. It's very important to know about the political landscape. Reforms don't end after elections, after re-elections. Reforms continue, and any digital transformation, any digital solution, if we speak about big scale, that takes longer than 5 years, usually 7, 10. And so we are talking about the culture change. And for me, these are three basic risks or indicators I would pay attention to when when we develop new instruments and we introduce those instruments. Thank you. I would like to ask Nino to comment, to make your comments about the risk, about how a civil society can prevent negative effects. And also, please ask questions because we'll have a session, answers and questions. And I will select those questions and I will ask them. Nino, the floor is yours.
So I have to agree with what Shandor and Christina said. I think two biggest risks associated with digital transformation is like, you know, when you first asked what was the benefit of digital transformation, I said the more inclusiveness and better accessibility. However, it can also eliminate some parts of society, population who might not have like better that like digital access needed in order to use our work and our services. This is something that we need while we are like digitally transforming, and we are really taking all the benefits that this digital transformation brings to us. We should also keep in mind that there are some shortcomings and try to address them in the parallel activities. Another issue is definitely the personal data and how vulnerable we are becoming to some violations which might not have been that easy if we were not so digital. However, I believe that the solution to every problem that is created by technology lies in technology itself. So I think by keeping civil society representatives and activists up to date with the technological advancements and all this like all the changes in this digital field, we will equip them to be able to respond to all these risks that will be arriving from this transformation. So I think it is very important in order for us to be really capable of addressing the risks. It's very important to keep civil society organizations in the heart of digital advancements, and whenever there is like some like innovation happening in the private sector, in the government sector, we need to make civil society organizations part of this. Otherwise, we will not be able to keep up with the changes, and we will not be able to do our work the way it is needed to be done, like to be better watchdogs, to be like able to make sure that the human rights are defended and so on. So it is very important to make sure that we are up to date with all the technological changes and innovation.
Thank you, colleagues. Jakub, at his introduction, he spoke about, maybe I will do it in English. I will say it in English because I want Mr. Jakub to make his comments.
You were paying certain attention, actually quite important attention, to the risks which are brought together with digital transformation. And you mentioned that values are the possible foundational benchmarks against which we measure whether digital transformations are successful or not. So you have a question. First of all, whether I understood you correctly, whether it's your statement that evaluating risks and success of any digital transformation, we still need to go to the basic benchmark criteria, which are the values. And if so, what do you think are the risks brought by digital transformation onto our values? And what should be the role of civil society in defining, protecting, and so on values?
Kind of a complicated question. I think, yeah, I think the kind of a fundamental thing is the question of what is of kind of a technical capacity. On the other hand, is basically purpose, purpose and reason for doing things, which has to be judged against value. So the efficiency, it's not. I mean, it's a technical value, and I think for example, I mean, sometimes it's again is a part of this ambivalence. For example, the internet gives freedom of expression, if you like. So you cannot, people can say whatever they want, if you like. And the provocative thing is, even though they very often have nothing to say, it's like a kind of an obsession of self-expression. And basically, internet in this, especially in this form of communication, is very much based on emotion, on pathos, if you like, on this kind of let me tell you what I feel. I mean, in terms of the democracy, at least in the traditional kind of a model, it is much more rooted in a kind of I don't know, debate, a kind of referring to facts. While now we almost abdicate from a kind of a traditional because it the there was this kind of a belief that since we have those tools of communication, it's a way by which we can understand each other, communicate, etc. What's happened is that you have obviously it's bad to have a monopoly of the information. On the other hand, basically this kind of the other side of the pluralism is complete chaos. I mean, I was for 6 years the chief of the board of a national media in Poland, public television. It was completely different television than right now, being honest. But we have a lot of debate. What is the value of public media in a sense? And I think there is everybody knows BBC, and the interesting point about the BBC is the public is the word broadcasting. So there is a one kind of the understanding what is media for, which is basically trying to have a common reference line. You can disagree, but you have at least the same elements of that. While the kind of internet is very much about, people call it narrowcasting. We know it as a bubble algorithm, basically chamber of echo. We talk to the people who are more or less the same, and you can compare it with the situation, biblical situation of building a Tower of Babel. So we had hope that we can communicate and build things together for better world, and something happened that the world completely collapsed in terms of the how many languages we speak. It's not only about bubbles, it's also I have 3 kids, and I already observed that even though with them, this completely different. They have their own idioms and languages, and the tools of those kind of a traditional communication, Facebook, WhatsApp, TikTok. You have the different layers of communication. So basically, they create their own idioms. So our languages are completely mixed. And this is one of the problem we're talking about, values, that everybody has its own kind of a of the reference point. I don't know how to use right now, and I promise to. I had a lot of communication right now with people who are organizing protests here now in Poland, and also with people from Belarus. And you are much more better expert probably here than me. But I'm as a sociologist, I'm interested how the dynamic of social movements, everything from Podemos, Black Lives Matters, Occupy, many other movements, how they are how they create their internal communication system. For example, Facebook is maybe nice thing to to collect people together, but in terms of the practicing kind of a democratic communication, organizing, etc., is a disaster. I know so many very interesting movements or small organizations completely, corrupted, not by the Facebook as a corporation, but the structure of controlling information. So I understand right now, for example, that one of the biggest thing is how to equip social movements with the relevant communication tools, because it's not like a neutral and so anyway, anything from Lumio to Liquid Democracy, many others, how to create the tools of communication which really give a power of participation, disagreement, collective decision making, as opposed to technically, basically, so that's, for example, the for people like here, it's a technical problem, how to create the syntax, which is much more complex and kind of sensitive to the nature of a democratic movement, as opposed to corporation or chit-chatting with your neighbors. This is a technical issue. How to
Дякую.
make the thing, how to collect.
Дякую.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we move to questions. Our time is almost over. Please, all panelists, be very brief, up to 1 minute, for us to cover some questions. I will not ask all of you to answer, only those who volunteer. Just switch on your microphone. I will continue what Mr. Jakub told. And the issue of chat. Do you have examples in your countries, Georgia, Hungary, Ukraine, Poland? Do you have examples when governments of the countries use digital instruments, digital transformation projects in order to suppress civil society, to influence, to enforce civil society to do something? So anybody would like to start? So let me begin. I'll start in Ukraine, for example. Yes, in Ukraine, there are some technical solutions that are used by the government. One of them is ProZorro system. It's a public procurement system. The system with the help of which different public institutions in the public sector or who use public money, they procure different services and goes through that service. And the system, ProZorro system, is 4.5 years, and it saved for Ukraine 148 billion hryvnia. This is just fresh data. The system is recognized one of the best in the world. So this is one of the first successful technical solutions that we were able to, in cooperation with between civil society and the government and business, to introduce into life, and it's still working. Though until now there were a lot of attacks against the system, and they wanted to make it localized and to give preference to local producers. But cooperation in this triangle is keeping our society together, and it helps to protect the system and to create equal rules for all. Next solution, please. And thank you for your answer. Which project of digital transformation is the most successful in Ukraine? Thank you for sharing your experience. I would like to come back to the question. Are there examples when the government is using technologies, digital technology, in order to influence on civil society, to create some pressing, to suppress civic society? Are there cases in other countries, in your countries, when the government is using technology, digital technologies against their societies? Thank you. Thank you for the success story, but now I need just quite a different example. Maybe Shambar?
Yes, just very, very briefly. I think our government is not very sophisticated. It uses, in this regard, this very primitive tool, let's say, of, through social media harassing activists through direct messages on comment sections and create an atmosphere where people are afraid of telling what they believe. They feel uncomfortable because they share what they're doing or because they're doing. So it's an extremely primitive way of pushing back on those who criticize. It's technically not the government, it's proxies of the government, but obviously in connection. I think that's a very well-known thing, but we don't have any innovative things for governments to learn how to do that. Our government is quite primitive, I would say, in this regard.
I can say we don't know that much because part of this probably is the using the advanced. It's very similar like in Hungary. Basically, government is not very sophisticated. They use basically hammer and traditional commenting mechanism, etc., etc. They pay people for writing those kind of emotional stuff. They weaponize social media, but it's it's not big. It's kind of a brute force, put it that way. On the other hand, we are simply not aware of how much they might know through the purchases, mechanism like Pegasus, for example, which was purchased in Poland by the secret, services, basically, because that obviously none of that, at least I'm not aware of any kind of a thing, but that's definitely they use and they have some intelligence, and obviously a big elephant in this room, probably around the speaker here, are basically Russians. We know very little about that thing, but I have no, you know, this country since 17th century, they have no either idea and mode of existence other than being an empire. And they are back. The part of the success of transformation of this region, including Poland, is basically that they were somehow hibernating. But last years, this is a very dangerous player. They have an economy of the size of Italy, but muscles, huge muscles. So I think that we shouldn't underestimate the activities of basically Russians in that region, in all the countries we are talking right now.
Nino, would you like to add on the point?
Yeah, actually, my response would be similar. To my knowledge, there is no like advanced technology in the government used to suppress the civil society activities. Only like some indications of trolls and bots in order to like pursue certain narratives, and sometimes maybe
лише деякі наративи, і можливо
maybe that
часом
disqualify some of the like civil society
дискваліфікувати
activists, like but not
певних
like this direct
активістів,
suppression that
але
we are talking
немає
about. Like to my knowledge,
прямого
but as
подавлення,
Jakub said, like we
наскільки я
might not
знаю.
know exactly what technologies are
Можливо,
being
ми не
adopted
знаємо
or
точно, яка
what
технологія
might
застосована,
be in process of like
або
having like on the shelf and being
яка на
able
полиці
to
там
like
ще
take
є
it
на
and use
поличці
whenever needs
технологія,
be.
яку ще можна
And
взяти і
as I know from
використати
my colleagues, there
технологію.
are some kind
Як
of
я
like
знаю,
indications of this in Central Asia,
від моїх колег
like
в Центральній
borrowing
Азії є певні
some technologies
показники.
from China and
Наприклад,
maybe with Russia. So
технології
like
з
we need
Китаю
to,
беруть,
just
з
because we
Росії
do not
деякі.
observe some of these
Оскільки ми не
activities nowadays,
спостерігаємо
does not mean that the threat is
цієї
not out there.
діяльності, це
So
не
we need to be
означає,
very careful and watch out
тому нам треба бути
for
обережними,
some of the similar risks in the future.
і щоб уникнути певних ризиків у майбутньому.
Дякую учасникам. Оскільки пані Христина почала частково вже відповідати на питання, назвати один цифровий проект. Я знаю, що в другій половині сьогоднішнього дня панелісти будуть більше
Christine is answering the question, quoting digital project. On the second half of the day, we shall talk of practical examples for implementation of digital transformation. As briefly we began, in each of your countries, what are the examples of digital solutions that have changed your country? Mr. Shandor?
I think Hungary is generally quite challenged in this regard. As we say, I would say we are in the region very, very backwards in terms of everything regarding technology, be it administration, probably also surveillance is not yet that advanced. But of course, I would say that this is very much connected to the attitude of the government towards technology. our people in charge, and our prime minister, who's been around for 10 years and shaped the country during the time when a lot of digital transformation in the world happened, is someone who is not really interested in this topic. And I think this is the reason why these things happen very slowly. I mean, it's going on because he cannot, of course, ignore things like that, but they're not topics that there is a high level commitment to. And with all the advantages and disadvantages of such an attitude. So I think this is what really shapes digital transformation in our country, and how the government benefits or is challenged by it. I would say probably if you would ask our government what they find a real challenge and what they are now very much worried about is content moderation on social media. They extensively use social media for their propaganda. Nobody is really watching the government TV because it's incredibly low quality and so direct propaganda that nobody turns it anymore on. So even the prime minister announces everything on Facebook. And some very fake news messages, not from the prime minister, but let's say from proxies or some government close actors, are actually censored or stopped by Facebook, and they're really disappointed about. So for them, one challenge definitely is that there is content moderation exists, and not everything they want to spread can go through. So they even established a working group about digital rights, digital security, where they want to tackle that. And it's a serious topic that, what to do with Facebook content moderation, which is actually a real topic. It's just funny that, it's addressed by an authoritarian government that realizes that someone stops them to doing what they want to do.
Дякую. Якраз останнє питання ми тоді піднімемо, частково питання безпеки, що воно є, як нам з цим жити. Щодо питання, приклад...
We shall discuss security, of course, about the question of digital solutions that have changed the country, positively or negatively.
Not really. I really agree what Shantur said. I think like in that regard, we really share the same situation in the selected countries that we are representing now at this conference call.
Якубе, можливо, чи...
I don't have anything to add right now.
Христино, я трішки перервав в попередньому питанні, але я так, чи є, чи та...
I have interrupted the previous question, but if there is another example, in addition to Prozoro, are there any other examples? Yes,
активів держави.
Yes, indeed, there is another field of sale of assets, privatization, rental, concession, sale of government and municipal property. In 2016, Ukraine faced a challenge to liquidate 50 insolvent banks, and the assets had to be sold to pay to the depositors. By example of Prozoro, they called Assistant Prozoro Sales. It's a standalone state-owned company, and Ukraine is now introducing electronic system to sell actually all the assets which can be sold in Ukraine. It was done by local and central budgets for 30 billion hryvnia. Those are huge amounts of money, a lot of bonuses. And by example of successful sales of assets, we are trying to build a new culture of quality state property management. This is our positive experience. So from procurement to sales. We still have 4 minutes. I would like to partially raise a question. I understand this would take several hours. How to improve digital security in the public sector? What security means to you? The digital security, cyber security in the country. Mr. Jakub, Could you say a few words?
Still, there is a question. You have to say it in English.
Yeah. So how do you think we can improve security in the digital sector? Security as such, and what is security in the digital sector?
In digital, I'm not an expert on the digital sector. I think it's very hard to go beyond the kind of a banal thing. I can speak about non-profit organizations or the civic organization. I think the main mechanism for us is as either providing kind of a qualified tools, and I think the organization like TechSoups and other they might somehow refer to the things which are better than others, put it that way. And at least in Poland, we have sometimes this kind of a hysteric moment that everybody is basically spying on us. So you can see how many applications I have on my phone. So people have used kind of a gossip, maybe Telegram, maybe that, maybe the other. So this is a kind of the equipment, a kind of a civic and non-violent guerrilla to provide good tools. That's the one thing. And you have to rely on others people's opinion, obviously, because and it's very good to know that there are places which are which are when you have a trust to say what you're going to use. Otherwise, I think it's very much about the education kind of, and we have a lot of training in Poland about the kind of responsible use of technology, fighting fake media, those kind of things, and basically equipped ourselves to be. And that's it's very complicated, because on the other hand you have everything, I don't know, micro targeting, artificial intelligence, bots, etc. So you fight with machines, really. And it's a very good, big question whether we also want to use machines. So it's the robots against robots. And I'm not smart enough to decide that. And the last not least, it's to remind the good quality of analog, put it that way. Everything, pandemia is probably one of the things we discover more and more what is the value of communication, empathy, and you cannot transfer some things to the technology. And if you are lacking that kind of a skill of a human to human interact conversation, I think it's extremely poor. So the friend of mine from Germany, he wrote a book, I think it's called uh, Analog is a New Organic, in a sense. That's it's like a synthetic and organic food. And more we should, as a civil societies, organizations which are basically about human to human, trust, proximity, not jump to, I mean, if we have basically to remind the value of being together. I mean, in Poland, for example, we have obviously we're well equipped technologically, but from time to time we obviously was pre-pandemia kind of a meeting almost of a contemplative nature to the leaders of NGOs to stop and think. So the technology to finalize. So technology, so we use technology and not the other way. So I think NGOs have at least those three functions to help us to go through unavoidable, which is this kind of a technology kind of injection, if you put it that way.
На жаль, наш час закінчився, але якраз на цій ноті, я думаю, що було би
Our
правильно.
time is over. I believe that on that note, it would be right to finalize. I would like to thank the participants of the session. I would like to summarize the records I have taken. When we speak of digital transformation, most people were saying it's not a question why. Of course, digital changes are of advantage. Its inclusiveness of those groups that could not be in touch. As Mr. Shanter said before, this is now normal. The digital world is normal. If we are civil society, we want to be present, we must understand. We must participate in those rules, play under those rules. At the same time, digital transformation carries a lot of risk. Some of them cannot be assessed right now. They can be assessed over time. First of all, this is about change of the structure of society. it's an alienation, as Mr. Jakub said before, and one of the important criteria to assess success or failure is not just opening of some data, solving particular problem, creating particular value for various groups of clients, understanding that there are quite many of them in the country. And the key thing is a change of the structure of the system, including change of culture, the change of liaison of the players, and that particular change will make it possible to call the process of digital solutions a transformation, not just automation, but rather digital transformation. I would like to thank once again all the participants, Mr. Jakub, Mr. Shandor, Christina, for your ideas, for your participation. I hope next year we can see each other live. We shall return back to the conditions that we people are natural for.